Okay. Welcome. I'm sorry. Heckler's over here. Yeah, Conrad, you stay there. Yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and start. Okay, thanks.
And next up, we've got Mark Davis giving a talk on the various design issues CLDR has faced.
Okay, what we're going to do is take a look at some of the design decisions that have been involved in CLDR and ICU. There's a joint meeting that the groups have to go through some of these design meetings. I'll go through one of them in a little bit of detail, and then I have some other options that we can talk about in more detail, and that can be a little bit more interactive. So let's start with dates. Here are examples of dates. I should have tossed on one with the non-Gregorian calendar because that's always fun. But these represent the kinds of things that we have to present to users in a meaningful way. So there's happens to have English, Greek, and Japanese. And of course, the layouts are quite different. The orders are different. The characters between the different placeholders are different. And how do we manage this? Well, back in 1990 something, arose in Intelligent and Java 8 date patterns, and these were the date patterns that were full, long, medium, and short that went into Java and then have promulgated around in different other environments. The syntax was inspired by Excel. So if you look at spreadsheets will have these kind of patterns that are using characters for placeholders, and that all works. And then you can actually glue them together with these, you can glue the date and the time together with a pattern that's a space or a comma or something like that. And then it supported from the very beginning multiple calendars, Gregorian, Japanese. You'd be surprised at just how many calendars there are out in the world. A lot of them are used, have specialized uses. So they're used for holidays or they're used for liturgical work, but a lot of them are in everyday use. So the syntax, I mean, the good and the bad thing was it was inspired by Excel. It's simple, but of course, as we went on, then we had to add more and more characters to get more and more different styles of things. For example, what we have is the day of the month, but in some calendars, in some use in Europe, for example, you go by the year and the day of the year. And the day of the year is different than the day of the month. And actually, the year start of the year used for days of months can be different because you also go through the day of the week and use that. So you'll say, I'm in week 5, and on a Tuesday, then you have to say, well, what is the start of week 1? Is it the week that contains the first day of the year? Or do we need a minimum number of days to categorize it as the first week, and so forth? So there are a lot of complications in this that come along. But then around 2006, we ended up saying, okay, well, this is just not working because these 4 formats don't work. They don't cover all the use cases. We need to be able to say December 10th. We need to be able to say October of 2025. So we need to have a lot of different kinds of combinations in order to deal with what people use in real life, and especially on small devices like cell phones. So we came up with the idea of date skeletons. And a date skeleton is something that maps from a series of these date symbols, like you see there with Y, M, 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 and map to a pattern according to the locale. So in some locales, the month would precede the year, and in other locales, the year would precede the month. And that is all determined by the locale. So when you look at CLDR or ICU, then this is what you'll see, is you'll see that we have these stock formats that are sort of long, full, long, medium, short for both dates and times. And then we also have these flexible formats that allow a lot of different kinds of combinations according to what the developer is asking for. Then we added intervals, and intervals turn out to be interesting because with an interval of time, you want to also have that be as short as possible. So you want to say, if I say, for example, October to November of 2024, you want to be able to compress that, and you don't want to have to say October of 2024 to November 2024. You just want to say October to November. So what you need there is you need to have, well, what is the skeleton I want? And then what is the largest thing that changes? Because you get a different answer whether it's the year that changes, because then you typically go the whole date down, the month changes or the day changes or the time within the day changes. So you get these various intervals. Then we've made many incremental improvements over time with dates up until, and I'll give some examples. We added day periods. There are a lot of countries where you use a 12-hour time, but you don't say AM, PM. They have no conception of what that means. Instead, you would say 8 in the morning, 8 in the afternoon, 8 in the evening. And we allow for up to 8 different periods during the day, which can vary by start and end date. Some languages, some countries are very clear and crisp about this. The Dutch are the best. They say, well, afternoon is from 12 to 6. Evening is from 6 to 12. Morning is from night is from 12 midnight to 6, and then 6 to 12 is morning. So nice 4 quadrants for the day, but most languages are much, much messier than that. And they have spans that cross noon or cross midnight and so on and so forth. And we ended up with a lot of customizations for the locale keywords. And basically, when you form a locale, like you say, I want English as used in the UK, a locale also provides a number of other key value pairs that can be used to customize various sorts of things, like the hour format and the day format and so on. It seems strange to put that in the locale, but it turns out that little did we know, Edison, in the design of locales, it proved to be a very convenient mechanism for transmitting customization information, because it goes through to everybody. It goes through the whole chain of events and down to somebody who's formatting a date, because they have to know the locale. And that way it percolates through all the different modules that are called by the time you end up having a date, getting it formatted, and then cycling all the way back up to the top. So that developed as well, but problems. The flexible dates are kind of too flexible, and I'll get into why. Any combination produces results, even those that are nonsensical or really rarely used. And there are some examples you see there. I can say, well, format a date with the year and the hour. Whoops, that's the wrong example. With the year and the AM, PM day period. Then you'd say, okay, well, 2024 PM, sure, I'll format it for you. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but I'll format it for you. Or if the patterns internally are not well constructed, I could end up with something like hour, minute, second, and have it be 0 padded for the hour, 0 padded for the second, but not 0 padded for the minute, which just looks wrong to people. There's more data than is actually needed in order to do what the commonplace operations are, and more elaborate processing than's needed. What happens when you use the flexible formats is it searches down and finds the best fit. Then it takes that and it modifies the widths of the different date fields to correspond with what I asked for, which allows the locale to say, well, I always zero pad this field and not this field. So that can happen. The locale can override what the programmer has added for, which you want in a lot of cases. You want the locale to be able to say, well, you specified this, but nobody in my locale ever uses this format. So I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do what is appropriate for my locale. But that requires a lot of processing and more data than really needed. So it has costs in terms of performance, costs in terms of code size and complexity. So semantic skeletons. Now, luckily I have Shane to call here because he was involved in the development of it. But the focus is on the high use cases, avoiding the rare, if ever, combinations, and using the same CLDR data to drive it, but allows you to pre-process so that you can have faster code and smaller data. So this is in tech preview for CLDR 46. And the basic idea is that we have a set of field sets, which are the fields to be displayed, like month and day. And these field sets form the date, the calendar period, the time, and the time zone, and they're all orthogonal. So there's no overlap between each of these. And then you have options for the choice and style of these fields. So long is an example. And these are length, alignment, year style, hour cycle, fractional second digits or not, time zone style, and so forth. So this is in tech preview for CLDR 46. And I think this might work. So is that still showing up? So this is in part 9, I believe, or part 4. Part 4 of the LDML spec. You can read all about semantic skeletons and what they involve. And there's an implementation coming in IC4X, so people can try it out and provide feedback into the tech preview before we finalize it. Shane, do you want to say any words about this before we go further?
I think you. Oh, I got it.
Yeah, he didn't know this was coming.
Yeah, so you can, as Mark said, you can already use these in the IC4X 2.0 alpha, which I'll be talking about tomorrow at my session tomorrow about that IC4X 2.0. Our goal also has been, we've been working with with Addison and Emily and the message format working group, because hopefully, we'd like to get this in elsewhere. Also, hopefully, eventually to ECMAScript. This has been a pain point for a long time with developers. I'll also go into a little bit of the background for why we sort of pushing for this. So there's sort of two angles. One is correctness, which Mark talked a lot about. The other is semantic skeletons gives implementations. Since there's a smaller possible space of field sets, it allows implementations to ship a much more efficient algorithm for actually taking the user settings and then rendering them onto the screen. And that's what IC4X has been able to do, and how we've been able to achieve a lot of the good performance and size numbers that we've gotten from there. I'll also point out that there's a few things in the semantic skeleton spec which should be mostly highlighted in notes. There's a whole bunch of things here that say note, this thing may be extended in the future. So as more people get to sort of come online and use this new way to express date time settings, If you encounter, features that are missing, we sort of intentionally started at the minimal set. But we expect to add things as users need them and as clients need them. So please send us feedback and get involved with the CLDR Design Working Group, and we'd love to continue to evolve this. This is just this is brand new, fresh off the press and technical preview, and I could look forward to seeing this continue to evolve. So thank you, Mark.
Okay, thanks, Shane. And thanks to Robin Leroy, who pioneered this, and Shane for putting it all together and working with other groups in order to get it to tech preview. So let's go back to presentation. And let's see. Hit slideshow again. There we go. Okay. So what's the process? Well, it was developed and refined in IC4X originally, with feedback from lots of other groups. I mentioned Shane and Robin for this. It was proposed to the CLDR ICU Design Working Group. We had many discussions over what, probably 5 weeks to center on what to do. Some of the topics were, what are the values for the day divisions, covering the day periods, which resulted in a new keyword proposal. What settings are user preference versus developer preference? Which lengths to support? How to select a narrow year versus a long year versus a long year with era, and so forth. So a lot of this behind the covers is people discussing back and forth and trying to center in on the kind of basic MVP, minimum viable product that would come out, but with room for expansion, and in tech preview for a lot of notes of, well, we could extend this in this way, give us feedback. This was then recommended to the CLDR Technical Committee, which approved it for tech preview in CLDR 46, and in a few days, according to Anne-Marie, a couple days, we're going to be releasing this, so it'll be available in the new version of the spec. And then we expect to have final approval in CLDR 47 if all goes well. So we might take some more time if we feel like we can get more feedback from external groups and so forth, but it's in a position where it can already be implemented and experimented with. Anything to add to that?
I think you said it all.
Okay. Okay, some other examples of things that we've tackled. One is that in CLDR, a lot of the data that we end up incorporating variants of the same data. And for example, some of these are geopolitical. Some companies and organizations need to say Hong Kong SAR, and some companies and organizations just go with Hong Kong. Sometimes there are geopolitical considerations, sometimes it varies across languages. We have just recently added a new alt equals official, and this is to cover the cases where a particular construct is not in customary usage. That is, most people don't use it, but the government really wants it. And for those cases, we're going to mark that as, well, this is official, which means that you and your implementation could choose to use this official one instead of the customary one. What we're also looking at is how in ICU is, how could we make this be available at runtime? Because ICU can be used and pick between different alt variants, but usually that's a build time choice, which means it locks it in for that, and the developer can make no choice for that. So if you're building ICU for your organization, then you're going to say, well, my organization says we're going to use alt equals official. That's it. No other choice. And often you want to make that more customizable by developers. One of the issues, and we ended up adding this alt equals official. Quick question.
Yeah. Is there any thought to standardizing the alt access stuff? Because I know I struggled over time with there's just these various different exceptions that have crept in as alts. It's hard to know how to get at them through APIs.
Yeah,
Therefore,
yeah.
you know,
How do we, so how can we standardize the alts, I guess? Yeah, thanks.
If you can repeat the question.
Okay. Addison said in my words, it's kind of a muddle what the alt values are. And that's something that Marcus filed a ticket about years and years ago, but we want to try to deal with. So one advantage is that the alt mechanism allows us to provide multiple tags for the same element, which means that we can add a new tag with a defined semantic, keep the old one for whoever wants to look at it, and then have a semantic that's more meaningful. Yeah. AM and PM in languages that don't have it. A lot of languages, I talked about the day periods. A lot of languages have nothing like the word AM, PM. They just don't use it. They don't understand it. They use a 12-hour clock, but they don't have the concept. What we found in a number of languages, like those of India, is people just prefer to have the English AM, PM, even though everything else is in Devanagari or Tamil or Telugu or one of these other languages. But AM and PM works because everyone recognizes it and nobody knows what any of the other terms mean. So we decided to go for that. These are issues that have been decided in the design group. Splitting the first day of week. We have a first day of week I alluded to earlier, and we've decided that we're going to go ahead and split that between what the calendar on the wall normally says and what business software normally uses, because those can be different in certain countries. In certain countries, you'll have one, say Sunday is the first day of the week on the calendar, but you'll have Monday as the first day of the week for business calculations. Adding long compact currency patterns so that you have the ability to say $1M, so for $1 million, which turns out to be an interesting process. Shane's also been pushing and involved with that. Some additional defaulting mechanisms in user preferences. So having region defaults, for example, for user preferences for units, so that we can say, well, instead of having to list each language, we'll say, okay, these countries for this kind of thing follow US preferences. So we're going to give you that with some exceptions, which can also be detailed. Reserving certain date time field values for private use. That's something that also came out of IC4X. And adding a unit of night, which is different than day. And nights have a peculiar, they're incommensurate with days. And nights are used, for example, in hotel reservations. I'm going to stay 3 nights. But the exact definition of them kind of varies. So when the night starts and when the night ends and so forth depends upon usage. So these are kept to be completely incommensurate from days, which are 24-hour periods. So these are some examples of just recent things that the design groups have looked at and come to a determination for. Future things. One of the things we're really interested in are called mixed locales. And a lot of UIs let you say, well, I speak English, but I live in Uganda, or I live in Kazakhstan. Okay, what kind of what kind of time formats should I have? What's the best time format to give to that person? Do I follow Kazakh standards? Do I follow US standards? And so we're debating how we can fit these together, because we can be handled any combination of language and region, and we're expected to do whatever's best. Adding more date and number user preferences and locale IDs, that's something that's also been requested, so that we could override certain things like the ordering of elements in a time form in a short time format or short date format. Handling LDML aliases in client software is a big topic. Inflections in message format 2.0, that's going to be a big topic, not primarily for the design group, but for the message format work. How do we integrate the inflection work so that I can really have inflected messages using message format 2.0? And when's your talk, Addison? Tomorrow, yeah. So anyone who's interested in messages and how they're put together, I'd recommend Addison's talk. One of the things we've been looking at is the segmentation is the process of dividing things into words, user characters, what the user thinks of as a character, sentences and lines, where do I put line breaks? And we have customizations of those by language, but it turns out to be very tricky to do. And one of the things we're looking at is changing that mechanism so that instead of having special rules that override things, we would use the same rules, but then make it really easy for people to say, well, a colon in my language in words behaves like a hyphen in the general algorithm, so that I can really easily modify things just by saying, well, this character behaves like these other characters. And that proves to be particularly easy to do in software, because you're just modifying the class of a character before the rules even hit it. How do we do precision in mixed units? If I have 3.21 degrees and significant digits of 3, what is the expectation that that should look like? Should that be 3 degrees, 12 minutes and 36 seconds, or should that be 3 degrees and 13 minutes? So how do we do that exactly? Currently, we do not specify that. We leave that up to users to do whatever they want to with it. Changing GMT to use duration units is something that we've been recently talking about. This helps to reduce the overlap between elements of CLDR. There's a special hour format for using with GMT and time zones. And it turns out that we can probably use the duration units instead, which are used to say, how long a video is, X hours and 15 minutes or whatever. And so we're looking at that. And then one perennial issue is 12 midnight on Tuesday. What does that mean? Does that mean 12 a.m. Tuesday -1? Or does that mean 11:59 Tuesday +1? Well, it turns out most software treats it as the start of the day. But of course, there are languages where it would be treated at the end of the day. And there are a whole host of languages where you just want to never say midnight because you don't know what it means. And if you look at, people have the same problem with 12 a.m. versus p.m., which is interpreted as noon. And a number of lawsuits in the United States have said, well, it means this. And that's one way to solve it. But one issue is, how do we deal with this? How do we handle midnight? So that's the end of the talk. I have plenty of room for questions.
Question.
Conrad, state your name and organization.
Hi, I'm Conrad, and I kind of volunteer for Unicode. It's my current organization. So say that I see something in the LDML that I don't like how we organize population data or territory information. Would it be should I write up a proposal for the design group? What is the process to make other changes? Is it to all go through this group?
Sure, good question. Now those get recorded, right? So I didn't need to repeat them. Yeah. Basically, what you do is you write a ticket, and in the ticket, try to describe, and if it takes more than a page, then write a document and attach that to the ticket. But the more complete you can make a proposal, the better off. And it also helps to put in options to say, well, I'm proposing ABC, but here are some of the other options, and what are the trade-offs? And that way you give a really good sense to the committee of, which directions could we go on this, what would fit in the best with the way that software is currently using it, and so on. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
Two different questions. You mentioned about the alt official. When you were talking about that, you mentioned Hong Kong SAR. So, but is the alt official used, or is it going to be used possibly for region names? Because that is a particular case where I think the customary name for that place would be Hong Kong, but the official name would probably be Hong Kong SAR.
Yeah, I mean, one of the parts of, good question. One of the parts of rationalizing the alts are to give better semantics to them. Currently, I believe it's called alt equals short, which it is, but you could also attach other semantic information. Another part of using the alts is whenever you make a distinction, we have a default value, which is unmarked. Whenever you make a distinction, typically you want to provide two variants and mark the variants. So you want to say, well, our choice is Hong Kong. The official version is Hong Kong SAR, and the short version or colloquial version is Hong Kong. And that lets people switch between them, but also get a default. So that's what we're doing with the things that we're marking with alts currently. And that way you can change the default, but people who are using the specific values still get the one they really asked for. You asked a second question.
So yeah, the other question I had in mind is you mentioned about the drafting the upcoming work, the first one, about, for example, the geographic variants or so on. As an interested party to how this is gonna happen, is there a way for me to participate, or where would be an appropriate place for me to see and participate the discussion about what's gonna happen with these specific geographic variants of languages that where the inheritance is
mixed locales.
Mixed locales.
Mixed
Yeah,
locales,
sorry. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, we're talking about that in the design group. The way that work groups work is that if people outside of who are not Unicode members want to get involved, then they approach the chair and say, tell what your expertise is, what value you would bring to a particular topic, and then the chair will say, well, yeah, sounds great. We'll have you in, or sorry, go away. So it just depends upon the particular case that you're interested in. And a lot of times what we'll do is we'll have a meeting where we'll invite an outside expert on particular topics for a while. Or there are people that are just in regular attendance. Does that make sense? Okay. Other questions or stunned silence? Yeah, Addison.
Since nobody else is stepping up. I'm semi-excited and partially scared about semantic skeletons. I I loathe picture strings. I like skeletons, but the soup of letters is hard to teach people and hard to teach people to manage well. So I'm excited about it from that perspective. But the one thing that scares me in the discussion has been we potentially left out some of the patterns that might be less used. And knowing UX designers in various places and their love for unique date and time patterns, that's the fear is I can get up to this line, I can do this much with it, but then I have this special thing where I have to write spaghetti code to get the format that I want. So is there, I guess I'm looking for reassurance that we have pretty good, solid coverage and that we didn't leave some things out for future adoption because we just didn't feel strongly enough about it?
Well, I'll take an example. Well, first of all, you can get involved in providing feedback on what's there. Okay. What is the kinds of things that are still not in are things like week of year plus week of year plus day of week. Okay, that which are definitely in use, but not as in common use as in user interfaces. And those are the kinds of things that you want to provide, feedback on.
And you could do with multiple field.
You can do with additional fields. I mean, one of the things we've also tossed around over the years is the alphabet soup is difficult for translators. And in the survey tool, the way the survey tool works is the survey tool will take the source and it runs it through this processing, which is called display for input. And that can present it in a completely different format than goes back in the source. So we provide both a formatter and parser for a particular kind of field. So we could take the alphabet soup and say, okay, we're going to display this as a chit with month abbreviated and day abbreviated and so on. We could do a kind of chit format for these things that people would find a lot with a well for being able to pick choices. These are kinds of things we could do relatively easily. It would be the cost there would be doing the interface for dragging and dropping and stuff like that. But we could have those kinds of capabilities to make it easier for translators to see. Yeah.
I'll also add a little bit to this question, which is I have an issue where I've sort of listed out 3 big topics that I hope to address with semantic skeletons in 47. Those are one thing we did not specify in semantic skeletons version 46 is how you would serialize them into a string. We basically specified structurally, here's how you would structure these in an API, but we didn't really specify how to put them into a string. So that's one thing that I would like to address, because I do think it's valuable to have a canonical string representation of these things. 2 is something I've heard a lot from Mihai as well as others, is this idea of per field length hints, because semantic skeletons, really leverages the idea of having a single length for the whole string, because most of the time, this is what developers should actually be specifying. It's how much space do I have on my screen, right? The decision between okay, well, should I abbreviate the month name or the weekday name to be shorter or longer? That's a translator decision, not a developer decision. That's the position that semantic skeletons takes. But I've also heard loud and clear that there's definite use cases for I actually want my weekday name to be spelled out, even if the translator said I prefer a shorter weekday name in this spot. So
by translator you mean CLDR contributing translator, or do you mean
no? I mean a company specific requirement.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are multiple per field
involved,
length hints. In any case, per field length hints is something I want to at least address and get a good solution to. The third was week of year support, which Mark already mentioned. So in other words, all these things are things I totally see this growing into, and none of these things are things that I think our design box is out of.
Yeah, because I
And-
mean, one of the things that's wonderful about skeletons is, hey, translators, there's some date stuff in here and you can see what it is, but you don't have to do anything to it anymore. The machine will get your locale's preferred format and separators and lengths and all of that. And the UX designer has chosen what they want to do, or the developer has chosen what they want to do.
Yeah.
And it's rare that the translator should need to mess with it because, you know, I mean, that's
Well, I think-
a late customization.
Yeah, I think the interesting point about semantic skeletons are that there's this big knob you can turn between giving control completely to the developer, which the patterns do, and giving the control completely to the API caller. And a lot of times what you want, the API, giving control to the API caller can be dangerous because they overspecify something that doesn't need to be specified. And so I think part of the value of semantic skeletons are, I just want to say, give me a short date for German. I don't care what it is. Okay, give me a long date for German. I don't care what it is. I don't need to know the details.
But we have the 4 magic keywords for those. It's everything else is give me year month, but sort of the medium size year month, you know.
Yeah,
and
that's
that-
kind of what
that's
kind
what
of what
semantic
skeletons do.
is bringing us.
Yeah, they give you, let you specify certain combinations of things. If you look at the LDML, you can see combinations, but it tries to make sure that they are sensible combinations and that the options applied to them sort of make sense as a whole.
Yeah, and I looked at it and I didn't see obvious gaps, or I would have filed an
Yeah.
issue. But the fear part is,
Yeah.
Did we leave something out and just not say what it was? And
Well,
and
convey
that's-
all of
yeah.
your fears to Shane.
I think we're basically at time also. So unless there's any other really burning questions, I think we should give Mark a round of applause. And we have another talk starting in this room in just 8 minutes, new in CLDR and ICU. Also, Mark, you can turn off the recording.